This
Thanks
conference will
everyone.
now be recorded.
Thanks everyone for calling in this morning. We're kind of we're picking up an out of cycle meeting this week. It's kind of an action from our regular monthly meeting a couple weeks ago to sort of just sit down and brainstorm ideas that pose, I guess, hurdles or obstacles for manufacturers considering offering warranties that explicitly cover immersion. And then our strategy then will be to kind of use this document as our kind of reference that we work from to create our guidelines document. In other words, sort of trying to work towards solutions for each of the obstacles that we identify in this brainstorming session. So with that in mind, I took some time and asked kind of around a little bit internally and just a couple of contacts that I have, so sort of what specifically are the are some of the concerns around offering warranty and immersion. And so I put this list together just to kind of get us started today. Definitely we can discuss anything that I put in here. This is sort of, like I said, just kind of compiling some thoughts from a few folks that I've spoken with. But I'll kind of just walk down this real quick, and then if there's anything we want to add or anything we want to change in the existing items, we can go ahead and kind of start that discussion. So kind of the first two sort of go hand in hand, the lack of data and reliability, but basically being sort of a newer technology or environment that devices be operating in. There's really not a lot of historical understanding of what the effects will be. We've got, I know, several other work streams that go into, a lot of the specific technical concerns around that, obviously, but that's still sort of a glaring issue in the minds of folks that are considering offering warranty, and then specifically reliability being a top concern, just because you don't want to open yourself up to field excursions, potential damage in the PR space, those type of concerns. Fluid variability, obviously there's a lot of different fluids that are available out there, and operational availability. There's, different customers can sort of implement their systems in different ways. They may have different setups, different operating conditions, even under the same fluid conditions. And so I guess kind of understanding that and being able to determine if new failures are a result of these systems and how they're set up can be challenging.
Hey, Michael, can we go back to number 2 on reliability?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's concerning that operating in an immersion controlled and cooled environment could impact the reliability and longevity of some devices. For one, we've always been operating in an immersion cooled environment. It's just that it's been immersed in air, not immersed in a dielectric liquid. And I might contend that the cooling medium, which is being proposed to use going forward, which is a dielectric fluid that is a liquid instead of an air, is actually a more controlled environment than the air that has been historically used. Exhibit A would be the Canadian fires that are causing all sorts of changes to the air, and I don't know. Our cooling medium is quite consistent, particularly in a sealed environment. We can't prevent Canadian fire contaminants from coming in, but we can certainly do that in a immersion cooled sealed enclosure. So I'm suggesting maybe we're creating more troubles for ourselves by suggesting reliability is at risk, because it's actually less at risk. I think we all know that we minimize or eliminate the most common causes of IT failure.
Just
Chad,
quick,
I, I
sorry, Rolf.
I really love your I love your speech right now, and I think that is something that will perfectly that will work really perfectly in a panel session or something along those lines. When it comes to this warranty discussion, though, we have to speak here. We have to identify the aspects that prevents the IT manufacturers from doing this. And I think when it comes to the controlled reference here, it refers to the shared body of fluid, where you're not really in control over which materials may react. And even though I completely 100% agree with everything you said, from the perspective of people who are used to controlling and designing the fans and airflow through a system that is in full control of the manufacturer, considering the fact that the immersion cooling systems are designed and provided by other entities, the manufacturer is no longer in control over how that fluid behaves. It's another party, but the manufacturer is still required to provide a warranty. I think that's what we are. That's what we should be looking at in the context of the warranty discussion. So instead of denying the principle, even though I fully agree with your arguments there, effectively in the end solution, yes, there is so much more control than any kind of air cooling you can imagine. From the perspective of the manufacturer, it is not the case, at least at this point in time. And that's something we're obviously trying to change, right?
Just
Okay.
quickly adding on to what Rolf has just said, and everyone else is very quickly. I'm just wondering, from a warranty perspective, could we use a cross industry that is also using immersion historically in a safety environment for like deep sea submersive vehicles, which use it? I
like it.
understand they use it to then cross-reference that from a reliability, but also from a lack of data as well. So you then get those type of arguments being cross-referenced whereby it's already being used, but in a separate industry for their safety requirements, because they cannot use air due to the fact of it. For a deep sea submersive vehicle, it would implode if they use air, so they can't use that. They use different ways of cooling and different ways for their IT. So those type of examples whereby you can use cross-industry as an example to sort of like counteract from a warranty perspective. I was wondering if that's something we should be considering or to advise them on as well. Because the immersion fluid's been around for over 100 years. So it's just a case of it's only more in the last 10 years and now getting traction. So it's not
Yeah.
it's not
Honestly,
something that hasn't been around.
I don't think that the safety of the application itself is called into question by any of the manufacturers. To be honest, I fully agree again also with what you're saying. And I derive my inspiration for starting Asparagus at the time also from the submerged the submerged vehicles. And but again, I think we have to focus on the IT equipment supplier, what their hurdles are, instead of pointing out the other areas where it works and it has proven its track record. I don't believe that there is a single IT manufacturer who doubts the inherent safety of using a dielectric fluid to immerse the equipment in. I think we're already past this stage a couple of years. I think the problem here is what is in the way of warranty, and that comes to the sentence that is there on the document, which refers to the integrity to the level of control that the manufacturer traditionally has on how the fluid, whether that's air or something else, behaves within the chassis, because it's typically fully designed into the reliability, into the server design and the way that the server is built, and is able to maintain its own internal ecosystem, right? Does it make any sense? Or am I just slamming down everybody? Because that's not really not my intention at all.
Makes sense. It makes sense, Rolf. I mean, the only thing I'd add on to this from my side is that case of perhaps part of the OEM process to help validate this for the warranties is the fact that they then test it with certain fluid providers who then run tests or help do aging tests with different sort of temperatures in the background to replicate an aging process to see how it would perform. And they then give it a seal of a stamp for approval for, say, X amount of time based on those tests that are then being conducted. And I can't talk for those fluid manufacturers, but that's something that I would be looking potentially to have those conversations with them to say, have you approved this? And what is your, from what this equipment being run in there for that length of time?
Look, I think our life would be a lot more simpler if there were one type of immersion solution in the market with one type of fluid that every manufacturer would be happy to embrace. Because then everybody could use the exact same way of work and there would be one set of references. The problem is that we have by now many dozens, maybe even over 100 different fluid specifications and different types of solutions, open bath, enclosed chassis, and even the open bath systems, they work differently. They all have their own proprietary means of managing the IT equipment.
Could we not be a
also
bit more specific though?
Yeah.
Could we not be a bit more specific and just say actually what compounds it works with or doesn't work with? And we asked the fluid manufacturers to state, does it work with, as per their fluid safety sheets? Okay, PVC,
yeah,
it will cause a vulcanization effect. Polyurethane, absolutely fine, ticking boxes.
That's what has been done in the materials and fluids work stream. They've published a whole document on that based on different fluid categories. But if you're looking at the total amount of components that make up servers and that constantly changes with new server designs, it's very difficult to keep track of that. And it's not the server manufacturers who do this testing, it's typically the fluid vendors, which also gets it somewhat out of the hands of the server manufacturers, right? So this exactly what you're suggesting is what the Fluids and Materials group has done, or at least laid the foundation for, with a lot of open sourced test results for different materials in combination with different types of fluids.
But can I not just add something a bit silly here? That's a hell of a lot more than what's ever been done with air, for example.
Yeah, because everything that is historically designed to operate in terms of electronics was already designed to do that in air. So inherently, everything that's manufactured for electronics application is typically designed for specific air operations, and there are standards for maintaining certain air qualities in data centers when it comes to fluid, humidity, and pollutants. That's what S-Ray has done. So it's because fluids are still exotic for electronics that there is a lot more that needs to be done, because all the electronics components have not originally been designed and operated in fluids. And that's a major difference between the two industries.
Yeah, but
does that help?
But is it? And it is interesting that the fluids and materials have come together, because I presumably, to Jonathan's point, the submerged vehicles out there have a fluid spec that has to be maintained, and then the electronics companies also have to say, well, we're not going to change the components of the materials that are going. So there's actually two different specs. There's a hardware spec, and then there's a fluid spec that has to coincide. It does seem that there might be some data out there that we could lean onto, and I'll still come back and say, are we trying to make it easier for us or more difficult for us? Because ultimately, you know, whether it's HP, IBM, or Dell, with a laptop or a workstation or a hyperscale data center, that may not be as easily to move from a desert to a seagoing environment where we are sailing around. Certainly the ability to control that change in environment
Do we not
is.
need to also point out the reduction of dust and sort of particles that can infiltrate the servers because it's no longer being in air, that it is then a fluid? Is
Yeah,
that not?
Exactly. I mean, we're creating hurdles for ourselves rather than saying, here's all the hurdles that we get rid of, and why this should be very easy to warrant. Or I almost feel like we're making a hurdle.
Should we not just be doing a very quick SWOT list, which just says this is all the good things, this is all the bad, this is the stuff we know, and then just do the
yeah, but
exact same thing for air as well? But yeah, sorry,
guys,
Rolf.
this has been done for this is what we've been doing for the past couple of years. We are on a different level now in the industry because there are manufacturers who are already looking into providing warranty. I think what this is about, what do the manufacturers need to provide warranty? Rich, Michael, you want to take this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
You want
that's
to
really
elaborate a little bit further here?
yeah,
I think the
Michael.
framework is really, it's a business decision at that point, and this is actually, like I said, this is based on actual conversations that we're having internally at Seagate right now in terms of how do we offer a warranty that explicitly covers immersion, and in our case, probably the same with CPU manufacturers. It's fairly high volume production, and so you generally need some sort of data that's going to underpin what your failure modes are and what your um, uh, predicted reliability is over the duration of your warranty. So I think it's again, kind of to echo what what Rolf was saying, I completely agree from a technical standpoint, and I don't think this is the message that we're planning to send or convey as part of this work stream, but this is more of the input that we're trying to react to. So I think it's a good points that you're making in terms of all the advantages to immersion. But I think, yeah, we need kind of, rather than just an explanation, we need to be able to show kind of the actual data that agrees with that or that supports it. And then that's how you can make kind of the informed business decision. So even if it eliminates, a handful of other failure modes, how do you know that it doesn't create others or replace them with ones that are more problematic, I guess.
So,
Well,
final
I
question.
think that's the point, right? Because it is a different environment. Therefore, you have to start anticipating different things, and the chemical element is one of them. But especially in terms of providing warranty, who is in control over the fluid flow through a device? Because that is a fundamentally different aspect to the IT design that we're introducing with the cooling, because the IT manufacturers are no longer in control over the cooling application, which they historically were. Right, so that plays into the discussion about, hey, you have reduced control over the cooling cycle as an IT manufacturer because you're suddenly dependent on a third party to provide that cooling, the cooling flow and the cooling dynamics.
Yeah, let me chime in on that one. We've had for years now fans that are variable rate fans based on the temperature of what's happening on your motherboard, particularly with the CPUs. So flow rate has been semi-automated for quite some time now in high-end servers. And so the only difference is that airflow rate or pump flow rate. So that's a little bit easier to get past. But then when people disable fans or don't replace their fans, obviously things start to overheat. So Michael mentioned some of the failure modes. I mean, I think we should identify the top 5 failure modes for immersion, which, and we should discuss those and make it quite clear. Here are your top 5 risks. Regardless of which fluid we've seen so far, these 5 risks continue to reach consensus as the main ways people mess this up. And I think by doing that, will build confidence amongst those who need to build warranties, because everything I've heard so far is very logical, and none of it will work, because ultimately this is about placing a $1 million bet. Somebody's got to bet that our tests will get it right. We'll do $1 million worth of tests and we'll know we got it right. Meaning, and so Michael, you don't have to write these down, I'll get them to you later, but the failure modes I would suggest are the top 5 for immersion are overheating, flow rate, both too much flow rate and not enough flow rate, pollution or polluting the actual fluid, and that includes, substances that should not be introduced into the environment, and as well as direct human contact without PPE or gloves on. That's very similar to the Canadian smoke. And then also unapproved peripherals, people leaving USB thumb drives on in immersion with bad plastic casings that cause chemical interactions. And then chemical interactions. So, individually, each one of these components seemed to test well, but when we put them all together, it created a complexity or an unknown interaction, and that caused a pollution, overheating, flow rate, or something else above. And so, taken together, those 5, in my mind, introduce the lion's share of the risk involved. And by just addressing those failure modes and others that others may have, coming up with the top 10 list, I think will introduce to people who have to write this stuff, okay, they know the risks. Now the question is, how do I assess those risks for my particular product, however I'm designing it? Now, I want to add one other thing. Can you imagine selling an engine that overheats within 90 seconds without a third-party radiator? Who would buy that? Almost no one. And yet, that's what we have in this industry right now. So I'm done. Michael, back to you.
Hey, Rich, just a follow-up question on what you just shared. These failure scenarios, is that something that is official communication from Supermicro? And if yes, is that something that you'll be able to release in a more formal way? Because sounds like this is incredibly valuable, right?
There's nothing official from Supermicro. This is
that's a shame.
And that's kind of the first
that would be really
here.
fantastic.
Yeah, what kind of, I think Rolf's getting at, yeah, that's really, like I said, the lack of data, and I can go tell our business folks, exactly what you just said, and here's what we might consider, and I can tell them, we think it's fine, and here's the advantages, but you're really just taking, myself or anyone, kind of at their word. If you can share something like that, like, the statement you just provided, and say, this is our official position based on our testing, and kind of support that, then it becomes a completely different conversation.
Big question, Michael. How much data would they need to have, or how many years worth of data or months worth of data, or would they be looking for as for a bare minimum, and how much context would they then need to have with that?
Yeah, kind of, so I think it's going to vary, obviously between manufacturers, what the specific business cases are. And I think it's also going to vary depending on, how much volume you plan on shipping for the application that you're extending the warranty for. For, I guess, just the example of disk drives in air, since we're doing tens of millions devices a quarter, we actually continuously sample and run reliability testing on a regular basis in a way that I don't think you're ever going to replicate in an immersion cooled environment, unless the industry was to shift entirely in that direction.
Quickly, Michael, what about the Bitcoin miners? Because obviously they've done quite a lot of this already in the background. I know a lot of that's unofficial data. where they switched quite a lot of their mining facilities into immersion, where they were running very, very high facilities. Could that not be used, some of that data, out of interest?
Absolutely, that would be, I think, very interesting if you had access or if somebody was able to share that data.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like I said, this is just kind of the feedback that I've collected, and granted a small sample size, and that's kind of was the point of having this session too. But yeah, just the reliability and lack of data from the business decision perspective is sort of where a lot of people seem to get stuck. I think beyond that, you kind of run into some of these lower items like the variability of environment from customer to customer and that sort of thing, and then even into the logistical complexity of handling warranty claims that aren't specific to immersion. If you're requiring specific conditions, or that they adhere to a fluid spec and it's maintained up to XYZ quality, how do you enforce that or and manage that from a manufacturer's perspective? And because then you're making an investment on top of that into additional resources or equipment and that sort of thing to administer your warranty. So I think that's kind of getting into the next steps once we get over the hurdle of convincing everyone that the reliability or the warranty return, I should say, moves in the right direction once you go to immersion.
Hey, just hearing this, what if we were to create a questionnaire for server manufacturers like Supermicro, component manufacturers like Seagate, and anyone else out there, and make sure that we can collect anonymized data? Is that something that would potentially work in terms of getting a better grip of the failure scenarios that are seen by the manufacturers? Because every brand is already in immersion, is already deployed in various immersion strategies, various immersion pilots, and all of the manufacturers are somehow involved somewhere with a pilot or with a test collecting data. Would it make sense? Would it be easier to collect anonymized data from the manufacturers to help us get a grip on the statistics here? Would it be easier for a manufacturer like Supermicro and Seagate to provide information in an anonymized content, in an anonymized fashion?
I guess what kind of like specific, you're talking just like your annualized failure rates, or
the type of specifics that Rich has just covered, and that I'm sure you guys have figured out within Seagate as well, with certain failure scenarios, whether they're chemical in nature or whatever. I can imagine setting up a questionnaire with about 5 or 6 questions that could give us a wealth of information to focus on and help us steer the community as well here in the immersion community towards the right topics to address and to study. Would that make sense?
It would make perfect sense, and I don't think anyone would respond because
is that so?
Because their concern is, I might be giving away some competitive edge. I don't want any litigious liability. I don't want to pay out on warranty later. So unfortunately, Ralph, the litigious nature of the US market means that everybody's going to clam up. Now, that said, you could get it a different way, which I kind of used the Tour de France in the chat window as an analogy. At some point 10 years ago, okay, what are the banned substances that people shouldn't have? And we got to the point where, okay, you can have 3 cups of coffee, but you can't have 5 cups of coffee. If you have 5 cups of coffee, you're banned. Things like that. Those tolerances were evolved over time based on feedback from the teams. And so I think we could do the same thing in that, look, we know what shouldn't go in the tub, right? But we don't have a positive list of this is the banned substances. If we had that and OCP issued that saying under no circumstances will these 18 things go in the tub, that would help a lot to alleviate, to mature the risk models and say, okay, if you take those 17 out, now the risk model looks doable.
That's an interesting approach.
And
I
it's
like it.
indirect enough that people would respond to it, because it has, me saying polyethylene causes problems doesn't put me or my company at risk. It's just my opinion. Now, if you get 34 other OCP members to say, yeah, polyethylene's a total pain in the ass, let's get rid of it. Okay, then we all voted it off the island. And then it occurred without any potential exposure. Does that help you think about it?
Yeah. Is that something that we can do from this community, you think? From this work group?
Of course. We have enough people who could anonymously vote about 24 to 36 different chemicals off the island. And we should.
Yeah, but I mean, we're going to need to set up some kind of a questionnaire, right? To identify these substances.
Yes.
Right. So what about setting up such a questionnaire within the warranty group here?
We certainly could. Certainly. We could do a straw poll. We could do it.
I think that would be a fantastic action item as follow up from this brainstorm.
See, because I'm, maybe Gerard of Submer, I'll pick on you. Maybe he doesn't want to identify that he was the one who nominated that particular substance, because that might give away some indication of who he's working with.
Yeah.
Because you could triangulate and reverse engineer back. Oh, that means he's working with blah, blah, blah on XYZ. Things like that. But if it were all anonymized up to Michael and me, and we agreed, gentlemen's bet here, we're not going to, there's no sources, right? It's us. It's the collective set of us, the warranty group, that made this. No individual, no company submitted anything. Then I think if we had those rules in place, then I think we could get that list. And that would be a great start, is what I'd suggest.
Sounds like a plan to me.
But I want to hear from someone else. Do people already know their list of 24 and 36 and they're happy, and that wouldn't be valuable?
I guess I don't know offhand. That would be interesting to go out and explore.
I think it'd be interesting. I think it'd be good to do that exercise. I think any site should know exactly what they've got on board anyway. So yeah, it'd be interesting. So, yeah, go for it.
Okay, well, then that's enough for me to say it's worth my time to do it. And, similar, I plan on just following what the tour did in setting up banned substances lists and totally ripping off their process and evolve it over time and mimic it, unless somebody else has a better idea.
I think it's a great starting point.
Rich.
Yep.
And then we come back every year and we look at it and say, should we add something else to it? And Rolf, maybe, yeah, we could definitely get this in place by the summit and say, here's our first 39 banned substances. These shall not go in an OCP immersion environment. By then we could vote on it and something more mature.
For the summit, all we need is just to make sure that we have this ongoing, right? It doesn't have to be finished, but at least that it's out there, that we're looking for it, and that may gain some interest. I mean, we haven't gone through all the topics, so we might be looking at some more activities. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, Rolf, is there any precedent or examples of, like, if we did a joint OCP reliability demonstration. Like I know there's been some, like Facebook or Meta and Isotope or something did a demo recently of their immersion system. If we had like an actual OCP one that we've used as a reference point and got, like I could get, as far as disk drives go, I could, I'm sure swing donating however many we needed to run that sort of reliability testing.
Yeah, there's no
enough...
OCP system for immersion.
Okay.
There's no such thing yet. There is no open spec for immersion at this time. I'm sure that will come at some point, but at this point it doesn't exist. And also the methods of immersion are vary greatly, but there is now a focus group which is still to be started, as something that I need to chase down together with the fluids and materials group. One of their action items with focus groups, already defined focus groups, is an FMEA study, a film mode and effect analysis study for immersion. Initially, that's going to be aimed at establishing achievable temperatures to influence the IEC flashpoint references. But eventually, we do intend to broaden the scope of that to facilitate other aspects to immersion as well. So that may fit well within the agenda that you're referring to. Whether that's a demonstrable effort is something entirely different. I'm not sure whether that can be a demonstrable something. At least not sure whether that can be done in physical form on a summit. If you understand what I mean?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I just think it would be interesting. It seems like everybody kind of does experiment with immersion to some extent, or maybe not everybody, but there's quite a few companies that are interested and involved. Everybody kind of pooled their resources and made a small contribution to an actual physical system, and maybe that just won't cover obviously every use case scenario or fluid type or anything like that, but at least it would be a study that's a little more, I guess, open kimono in terms of the implementation, and we'd use a procedure that we'd actually sort of agreed upon within OCP so that everybody's at least on the same page, and then maybe that becomes a good reference point for initially extending our immersion or warranties to immersion, and then further down the road we can expand from there, but you could at least narrowly define what your implementation had to kind of look like from a warranty perspective, if you had something to base it on.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with the principle, but I don't think we're far enough in the ecosystem yet to make that happen. But if anybody has ideas on it, then that would be awesome.
Okay.
And to be honest, we are still a couple of years away from immersion becoming a fully accepted technology, right? So, and it takes effort like this work group to cross that boundary.
Sure. Okay. All right. So is there anything else anybody wanted to add? I see we had a note here from Gerard in the chat about material and hardware variability. Oops.
Yeah, the variabilities are pretty much what is in the way for a lot of things, right? Just trying to think, is there a way to reduce the variability from a warranty point of view without impacting the absolute value add of the variations that we have in the industry at the moment. I personally am a very big believer of the value of variations, of the value of
Quick question, Rolf.
of this ecosystem. Yeah, go on.
EV batteries use the same immersion fluid or very similar EV dielectric fluid to what we're doing here. Could we use their warranties that they're putting onto their battery designs in combination for this? Because the EV batteries is obviously taking much faster precedence than what immersion fluid is currently from the data center industry.
The big difference is the simplicity involved with EV batteries, because the materials and systems don't have anywhere near the level of variation that we have in the immersion cooling application in data centers. The amount of unique service systems and network equipment and other potential components that you need to be able to assure compatibility with is such an incredible higher amount of variation. In the EV battery space, you're looking at a handful of variations of the batteries that are tightly controlled by the manufacturers. There's good references, and a lot of the immersion fluids manufacturers are looking at both domains. But one of the things where everybody starts bumping their nose is the level of complexity that needs to be addressed with immersion cooling in data centers compared to the EV industry. That is the big difference. The scale is different. Look, if you're looking at combining a fluid with a specific model car, you're instantly looking at hundreds of thousands of deployments that are fully identical. If you're looking to combine your fluid with one specific type of server, you're looking at a variation for each and every deployment, because every server gets combined with different cards and different cables, different small components, different spec CPUs, you name it, because it's the customer who decides on the variation of the server that they need for that specific application.
So I think this
that's
comes
nothing
back
like the battery industry, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just trying to think, just in my head, what was the best way, and I think Rich's original Tour de France approach, I think, is probably still the best one, just to put on there the list of what shouldn't be put into immersion and get that whittled down, and so we could then quickly identify that, because I think there will be very much as core elements that all servers use that I think can be very much green light and just say, yeah, they're all fine. And then the configurations and a different part of it. But yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the Fluids and Materials Group have been trying to crack this nut for the last 3 years. And they've been fully focused on precisely this topic, how to deal with the variation. And that's why they've been able, and which is absolutely excellent from an excellent outcome of that group, is that they've been able to liberate a lot of research data from manufacturers and have managed to get it out of the NDA scenes into the public, right? If you look at the wealth of information that has been published with the fluids and with the material compatibility document that has been published last December, that is astonishing. That level of disclosure is something that has been unprecedented within the immersion domain so far. So that is the biggest disclosure we've seen for years.
Interesting.
And that's a fantastic start. But it's still only the tip of the iceberg, because it doesn't go into the assemblies, it goes into individual components and their specific responses with marginal qualifications like unacceptable versus acceptable, and no examination of cross-contamination effects. So this is just a starting point, and everybody knows it. We knew it when that came out. We knew it when we were working on it, but we all knew, hey, we need to have a starting point somewhere that we can build upon, and that's what has been done. And that's astonishing, but it's only a fraction of the distance that it needs to cover. And then we're not even going into the topic whether IT equipment manufacturers will just take it for granted what is in that study. They'll likely want to see certain confirmations or want to eliminate certain biases from the organizations who've done the testing, or verifications whether the tests have been done appropriately, and they may want to redo quite a lot of that work for their components for different types of fluids again before they're willing to jump in, right? So, like I said, it's a starting point, good place to start, but it's nowhere there yet. We're nowhere near the finish line yet.
One other point to consider: the battery that you're discussing is sealed, and it's not there's no user serviceable parts. Nobody's allowed to crack that thing and introduce new risks or change the environment of that battery under its warranty for 8-10 years or whatever it is. And the other thing I'll add is, you know, that EV battery was tested. It was taken out to the desert. It was shot with shotguns. They did like $10 million worth of tests before it ever ended up in your car, because that's a regulated industry. And right now, server production is not necessarily a federally regulated industry. And so the main difference is there's so much testing that happens up front in automobiles and trucks in advance for safety ratings that's why the EV batteries can do what they do.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate the analogy on that, Rich. I was just I was amused by the fact they shot it with a shotgun, but not guns. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's just a case of we haven't got the same standards or rigors to go through this, so it's just a case of just trying to make sure we hit the warranties that need to be covered and making sure they've got answers that they need to have answered to. So yeah.
Yeah, I think as soon as the big four CPU manufacturers realized, just like the big three auto manufacturers realized at one point, look, we better deal with this or we're going to get regulations we really don't like. And I think Rolf's right. I think that regulatory thunder will increase over the next year until either OCP or some other industry alliance builds reasonable self-regulation in this space. If they don't, it'll be the EU and the US that probably start random regulation, which is never a good idea because it's always suboptimal. So I think this is all about building pressure to bring the top four CPU manufacturers to bear. And as you'll note, absolutely none of the four global top four CPU manufacturers are on this call.
Yeah.
So they are in the materials and fluids group, and there have been some discussions and questions regarding combining some of the efforts on behalf of the questions on behalf of some of the chip manufacturers regarding potentially changing the structure that we have currently in Immersion to focus more on reliability instead of the individual aspects that pertain to reliability. Is that something that you guys feel that it's necessary as well to achieve any kind of goals with warranty?
I think the reliability is an important one, but I think what we're actually, and maybe I not worded this the best, but what we're really concerned with is warranty returns. As a manufacturer, I mean, I should say, from a business perspective, if you're selling devices and then they're not being returned under warranty, that's your main objective. It's not necessarily that the devices are going to live in the field forever. You just don't want them back once they're sold. So maybe the actual number of warranty returns is what we're really after. And so maybe kind of to what Rich's point was of addressing the failure modes, our guidelines should focus on how to prevent that from happening with the amount of unknowns that are present in immersion, rather than trying to meet the same reliability standards, or I should say guarantee the same reliability standards that you would have in air, which you already have, decades of data to underpin.
Yeah.
So I think yes, but I think maybe there's a quicker path to meeting what we're trying to accomplish in this work stream.
Yeah, I think ultimately, Rolf, it's about this, that those same people in the materials, those engineers in the materials work group, as soon as they join a warranty work group, they'll be shut up by their general counsels who tell them, don't say a damn word. And so
Yeah, I hear you.
they may know the answer and now they can't talk at all. So actually, I'd leave them separate for now, because the real issue is the general counsels of those 4 CPU manufacturers are not talking. And they think this can happen without a warranty, because they're like, yeah, well, it's been, the Bitcoin miners didn't want a warranty. So why do I have to build a warranty now? I'll just let it ride. That's what they think.
Well, I think that's a little bit too skeptical. There is an inherent drive within Intel, for example, to provide warranty, which also explains their involvement over the past year. And the fluid spec has been a great step towards that they released through the fluids and materials community and the requirements team. And they're making really serious efforts to help us out in the community. But you are correct that a warranty group is something that they don't want to participate in. But they are providing warranty already.
So since you brought them up, 20 out of 1,000 of their products, they offer a very limited immersion warranty to. 20.
Yeah, I agree with you that is we're talking about tips of icebergs and the beginning of the race. We're nowhere near the finish, right? But it's a great start.
But at the moment, the way to get a server into immersion is you go to a third party who then provides that warranty service from a server they've configured and built. And they then give you 3 or 5 years, depending on their confidence on the server that they've configured to run in immersion. Is it a case that we're creating a cottage industry that then keeps on specializing in that, or is it going to be a case that once?
Yeah, the problem is that the reality is an intermediate business. Let's say an integrator that makes a profit of, let's say, 30 or 40% on a deal, and let's give it a deal size of 20 million bucks. Right, let's say they make 5 to 6 million out of it, which would be really high, but let's say they add a lot of services on it. The risk that they are taking is that 20 million's value, because there is a risk of all the IT equipment becoming damaged, and the IT equipment is the highest value in the deployment scene, in the deployment environment. That risk has to be carried by the integrator. Now, a 4 million risk or 8 million risk is something that they might be able to carry based on the profit margins. But when we're talking about the full 20 million, that could take an integrator out of business. And so the question is, if you're the end user, will you be able to accept an intermediate party to provide the warranty without it being backed by the original equipment manufacturer?
Yeah,
that is the problem, because the scale doesn't work. The integrating parties are always smaller, and it scales accordingly as well. So even if you have an integrator or an intermediate party that does a project for $1 billion, they're not at the scale to really properly carry the financial risk to provide a warranty in the worst case scenario. So for them, it's a risk decision to evaluate whether they are willing to take that risk, and they are taking that risk often because it's worth a lot of money, and the chances of it going wrong is maybe 1 in 100. But doing 100 of those deals may may result in that 1 in 100 losses that they did not anticipate because they relied too much on all the good words from all the parties involved. Like, hey, yeah, we believe it. Just like we said in the beginning, all these good elements, but by just following that blindly, you may be overlooking some of the things that have been built into the service that you weren't aware of, and that the IT manufacturer is not taking responsibility for because they have this disclaimer in there, and suddenly the intermediate party can go out of business because of a serious warranty claim.
Yeah, no,
That is a risk.
It is, Rolf, but at the moment that is how the industry's surviving and operating, or starting to operate. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get it completely. I'm just sitting there just thinking, yeah. And as
Which
Richard
is
rightly
why
says
this
in the
is
chat,
such a crucial aspect
Yeah.
to solve, because we need to make sure that the original equipment manufacturers can become confident enough and can do their homework sufficiently to provide warranty. We need to know what it is and how we can help with this group.
Yeah.
That's what we can put into guidelines and into advice, and that's what we can evangelize throughout the industry. Like, hey, if you're dealing with immersion, these may be some good guidelines on providing that warranty, because this is what we as OCP are recommending to you to look at. These are the things to consider that you may not have thought about, and things you may need to take into your warranty risk assessments.
No, I completely agree. I think from my side of it, some key takeaways would be the fact that you warranty the server, you warranty the fluid, you warranty the tank that's going into it, that's using it, and then you also want to make sure, as per the normal DC, that the site's also got that warranty and support as well to run it and operate it effectively as well. So it makes it a bit more heavy than it would be standard air.
And still, let's say, let's just take a brand. Let's say Dell engineers a server and qualifies it with a submer tank, and it works, and they start selling it for immersion, and they end up putting it in an asparagus tank or a GSC tank or somebody else's solution, or into an enclosed chassis, and suddenly it starts failing because, hey, it works differently from what they've tested it in. Who's responsible then?
This is why we're having this call right now. But yeah,
that's why this group exists, because we need to figure this stuff out, and we need to be able to provide some guidelines for the server manufacturers. Because very often they have no idea where to start, right?
Let me answer that, Rolf. With my litigious hat on, I go, oh, that's easy. It's Dell's fault, because any attorney we're suing both Submer and Dell couldn't give a rat about Submer because they're out of jurisdiction, and Dell's right here in Texas. So we money.
Which is why they don't give the warranty. Right?
That's right. That's right. And just I wanted to walk that through for everybody else to understand. It might be 100% Submer's fault, but because Dell's got more money and is easier to sue, literally, they're going to get the suit. And I don't want any of us to get the suit, but I also know that, you know, the construction industry may have best practices to follow, where, you know, I go for a remodel on my house and it's $500,000, and there's a cap or a limit placed on the entire contract that says under no conditions will the warranty ever pay out more than double of the value of the system, right? So these caps are very important in construction. Otherwise, there'd be too much liability and no one would build buildings anymore. At least in the States. I know it's easier elsewhere. But that's something else we might graft best practices from. Also, financing real estate, the way in which banks are forced to keep a reserve for our money. So if we put, you know, a euro or a dollar in, 5, 6, 10% of that, they're required to keep on reserve, meaning they keep that much liquid for this known quantity of continuous loss or shrinkage or problems that might exist in the ecosystem. We should do the same thing. Maybe there's some sort of retainer or fee like that. That happens in airline industry, right? 8 to 10% of our tickets purchased in the United States go into an FAA fund, which deals with crash investigation and also improving the bathrooms in all the airports and everything else. So why not do that with servers? Maybe that's another way of thinking about it. I think if we introduced all these interesting areas to graph from, we'd get a better response from the general counsels and the CFOs of the world.
I like that analogy, the FIA or the UK equivalent. It's like getting road tax. Pay for road tax, keep the roads updated. It doesn't mean to necessarily mean there won't be any potholes, but it means that it should be looked after.
But essentially, this is what integrators are already doing, right? When you're factoring in warranty and selling the warranty as a whole, you're factoring a certain percentage of the equipment to fail due to immersion that you cannot recover by the normal warranty procedures. That's typical for integrators to do when they're dealing with immersion or liquid cooling in general.
Yeah,
and the percentage differs per project, differs per opportunity, because that's the risk analysis that they're doing.
And right now, I think where the industry's at is people are doing the onesie, twosie, foursie type immersion tests, and they want to go to the next step, which is dozens to hundreds, and they're realizing that their system integrator won't cover them. They won't provide that warranty on 10 times the amount because they can't cover it. And so they're coming to the OEMs, present company included, they're coming to us saying, I want reinsurance. I want you to back up the system integrator. And that's basically no way are we doing that. That's so there's a whole level of I'd call it the adolescence of this industry happening, where it's not about the scientific facts of how this stuff fails. It's about demonstrating we have the business maturity, the business controls, the business risk levers in place for all the non-scientists to look at this and go, okay, that's a reasonable bet. Because I don't think we'll find one CFO or one general counsel who says, immersion, that's a reasonable bet. I understand that. We have not done that job yet. And so that's why I think the warranty group is more of a evangelism problem than a science problem right now. It might change, but that's my take on it. But I'd love to hear other thoughts.
I would suggest that we start, I think I mentioned this in the last call as well, I would strongly suggest that we start carving out a recommendations document with the areas that a system manufacturer might want to look into before getting into warranty, and then over time we can deepen the various aspects to it, but at least start with the main topics like looking at material compatibility, assessing the risk of failure, doing a failure analysis, that sort of stuff, without getting into any specific component or system. And then we can do more specific brainstorms on what elements would have to be included in each major topic, and we might refer to other workstream efforts that are already underway that may have already been published, like the material compatibility work, right? But at least that we get started with some kind of a structure in which that can guide us into the discussions. What are the next topics that we need to delve into, and how do we go about collecting the essentials for specific topics that can help manufacturers on their way. What do you think, Michael
Yeah,
and
that
Rick?
makes sense. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like that was kind of the what we were planning to lead into, I guess, out of this meeting, was to kind of take the feedback on what the concerns are, and then translate that into the specific areas that need to be looked at. I don't know that we've accomplished that just yet, but I definitely agree with the approach. I can take the action to start kind of putting some of those things together, and then look for feedback from everybody else on the call.
Cool. And I just realized that we're already 10 minutes over time, and my family's at home looking angrily at me that I'm not prepping dinner yet. So I'm gonna have to drop, guys.
Yep. Yeah, we can wrap it up there. So if
Right.
anybody else has any thoughts, feel free to reach out to us offline, and we'll reconvene in a couple of weeks here. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.